Hello and welcome once again to Loveland's Talking. My name is Andy Hiller. I'm the Public Information Officer here for the City of Loveland, and it's our good fortune to share with you once again this month some information about what's going on with the Loveland City government. This is kind of an annual show that we're doing here with John. John and I present this show pretty much every year. It's a look at the upcoming budget for the following year. We're going to be looking at the 2010 budget, and as you might expect, the 2010 budget has been a bit more challenging perhaps than some of the budgets in the past when we weren't going through some leaner economic times as we currently are. The bad news is that the city, toward the end of this year, '09, and again for 2010, is expecting less revenue than has come in the past. I suppose the good news is that, relatively speaking, things here in Loveland are far better than they are elsewhere in the country, and of course even compared to our neighbors here in northern Colorado and the area. So I'll let John say hello and introduce himself. John, please.
Hello, John Hartman, the budget officer for the city. I compile the budget and report it to council and help the departments with their budget submissions.
Okay, and you're kind of the hands-on guy putting all these numbers together throughout the year.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's begin with, if we may, the bottom line. As we've talked about, the budget for 2010 is a lot leaner than it has been in past years. This first graphic here shows the total budget comparison compared to the last 3 years. How does it line up here, John?
Well, our revenues have been significantly lower. We're projecting them to be significantly lower.
Yep.
Excuse me. And the result is that we've had to bring the budget back down to almost the 2007 level from a total city budget standpoint.
Okay, so we're kind of moving back 3 years, but I think it also is important to point out that, needless to say, although it hasn't been a great amount of growth, there are more people here in Loveland now, and there will be even more in 2010 than there were in 2007, so it's kind of a two-pronged thing. The money's being cut back a little bit to serve an even greater number of people.
That's correct. We have grown in population, but and we've grown in square miles to be covered as we've annexed more territory.
Yeah.
But we don't have the revenue to support that at this point, and so this budget does cut back on services to a degree.
Okay, and we're going to talk about that in more detail. Now, the budget is a confusing thing. We're going to refer to the budget book a little later, but you can see that is close to 300 pages. When people think of the city budget, they tend to think primarily of what falls under the general fund. What services and departments does that involve?
The general funds where most of our services to the public rely, and it's all the tax-funded services.
For example?
For example, our police department, fire department, streets, taking care of our streets, parks, maintenance, recreation. Those are the major services.
Okay, library, culture also come to mind as well.
They do.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and what's not included in that?
What's not included would be, we have 5 what we call enterprise funds. And those are services that operate as businesses and they have to be funded by their own fees. For an example, your water bill that you pay every month for your water, the cost of providing that water is funded entirely by the fees that you pay for the use of that water. There's not any tax money for it.
I gotcha. And another one that always makes people's eyebrows go up a little bit in terms of enterprise funds is golf.
It is golf, and we have the 3 courses, but the operation and the capital needs for those 3 courses all come from the fees paid by the golfers.
Okay, so if you're a tennis player, you're not helping to support the golf courses?
Not at all.
Okay, okay. So again, here's the comparison for the general fund portion of the budget, 2010 with the prior years.
And we've brought the budget down to just over $60 million, which is actually $3 million below the 2007 amount. And this is all due to the reduction in revenue that we're seeing in our sales tax revenue and in our building use tax and permitting because of the decline in the economy.
Okay, all right. Now, it was the instruction to the city staff, us folks, from the city manager, and of course the budget then is approved by city council finally, but to figure out how to cut these costs in order to balance the budget with less revenue, and some objectives were sent down to us also to keep in mind as we made our recommended cuts. Let's take a quick look at those.
Yeah, we had some basic building blocks, or kind of setting rules for the game, I guess you could say.
Well put.
And the first thing was that while we knew we had to reduce the budget, we wanted to minimize the impact that the citizens would feel due to the service impacts to the largest extent that we could,
Sure.
knowing that it wouldn't be possible to completely, we couldn't do this without impacting service, but
Right.
we were looking to minimize that. We also wanted to take a 5-year planning horizon. We build a financial plan every year that forecasts what will the budget look like over the next 10 years. We were looking to keep that plan solvent and making the numbers look right for a full 5-year period. We didn't quite get there, but we kept that in mind as we were developing this.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
In that realm of that 5-year planning, we wanted to maintain our reserves at about the current level that they're at now, for 2 reasons. One is there's not agreement among the economists in the nation or around the state about what the future is going to bring us.
Sure.
And so we wanted to be sure and have reserves in place in case the economy actually worsens, or if there are any other unforeseen events that would occur that would require some extra money on our side. And so we've kept our reserve balances at or near the levels that they currently are at, rather than spending them down to offset the reductions.
Okay, the reserves are our safety net, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay, okay. The next line item.
One of our major priorities of council, as well as the city administrator, is that we have a safe community. And so in looking at and doing our prioritization, the first thing we looked at is maintaining a safe community and keeping the community safe. And then finally, we wanted to review all the equipment replacements. We want to take care of what we currently have. But in doing that, is there some equipment out there that we were planning to replace, could we make it stretch a little bit? We tried to take an evaluation on that to see if we could save a little bit of money, knowing that it's something we'll have to do down the road. But did it make sense to replace it now, or should we try and make that equipment go a little bit longer?
Sure, I'm sure many of our viewers can identify with that in light of recent times. You know, that car they were going to buy, or that new lawnmower, or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
It's just going to have to make it another year or two. So, okay, good. Well, let's take a look at the overall budget summary, and you'll probably lose me here, as you usually do. Let's begin with the revenue side. This is where our money comes from.
This is where our money comes from, and even though it's not a real revenue, that top line, the beginning balance, that's the money that we have in the bank, that we have saved up.
That's what we started with.
And that's about $151 million. We're looking to get a little over $32 million from sales and use taxes. That's one of our largest sources for the general fund. We have other property, specific ownership, some other taxes, as well as some franchise fees that bring in almost $12 million. Intergovernmental and the private capital contributions, primarily that is revenue that comes from other governments. For instance, the state passes us through some gas tax dollars that we use for maintaining the streets. Or if we have federal dollars that come to us to help operate the transit system. Those are intergovernmental revenues.
Okay.
And that's worth a little over $13 million. It's about 8% of our total revenue stream.
Okay.
Impact fees goes by many names. We have a lot of different acronyms or alphabet soup for the impact fees. The more common name that a lot of the public may know them as is our capital expansion fees. In the utilities, we have a couple other acronyms, SIFs and PIFs, plant impact and
Please,
system impact.
Save me.
But they're, in essence, these are fees that we charge development to help us pay for the infrastructure that we need to put back in the ground for that development.
Sure.
So as our city grows, we need to add water lines, or we need to add power lines, or we need to add roads. These are the fees that pay for that. They're expected to bring in just over $5 million this year.
Okay. There are two other large ones that stand out. Let's look at those, the user fees and the utility charges.
The user fees primarily in the general fund, it comes from our Parks and Recreation Department, and that's through the fees that we charge citizens to use the Chilson Recreation Center and our adult athletic revenues that we use.
Okay.
We have a number of other user fees for things like collecting your solid waste, collecting the garbage, and there's some user fees even in our water and wastewater enterprises as well. But it's charges for services that we provide.
Okay.
Fines is pretty much just what it says. When you get a ticket for going too fast on the road, you'll pay for the speeding ticket. That's one of the revenues that we received as well. And those two are combined are worth about 31% and are 18%, almost as much revenue as what our sales tax brings in.
Yeah.
The other big one there then is the utility charges, and
that's gas and water and power.
That's your water and power. It is all of the charges that you see on your monthly bill that you get from utility billing, and it pays for not only your water and your wastewater and your electricity, but your solid waste bill. All of those charges are utility charges, and they fund so that we can ensure that you have water come out the tap and the lights turn on when you walk in the house.
And those are in that enterprise category as opposed to the general fund category that pay for the normal police and fire and parks and rec services. That basically what you pay is what you get for those things. You pay for your water bill, that gets you water. It doesn't have anything to do with providing police services or anything like that.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, well, that's kind of an overview of the revenue side. Let's look at the expense side a little bit and pick out a couple of the major players here. Well, these are basically the individual departments throughout the city for the most part.
These are, and we have what I often refer to as our big four.
Okay.
And in the total city budget, it's more like the big five.
All right.
I deal with the general fund. That's the water and power, public works, police, parks, and fire.
Okay.
Those five departments consume the largest share of all of our resources. They are where we have the most employees, and they have the most service provision. Water and power at 61 million, that is the amount of money that it takes to provide our water service, provide our sewer service, and provide the electricity.
Right.
That's all resides within the water and power department. Included in that $61 million is about $30 million that we pay for what we call purchase power. We have to buy our electricity from the Platte River Power Authority.
Gotcha.
But that's not, even though we have to show it as an expense here on the expense because we pay for that, we then turn around and sell that.
Right.
So of that 30 million, that 30 million expense will generate $30 million in revenue, and so real expense within there would be closer to about $30 million of actual expenses to operate the power, water and power
department.
department.
Half of that is the equivalent of your inventory, where you're buying in the service, the electricity, and then turning around and selling it pretty much for what you
buy the product that you're going to sell.
Right. You're buying it. Yeah. Okay.
Public Works at 31 million. The Public Works Department takes care of our streets, builds all of our new streets. They do our traffic signals. They take care of all of our buildings and maintain them. They run transit. They take care of the storm sewers. They take care of the garbage.
Okay.
That's the Public Works Department. The streets and transit are general fund agencies, and the facilities. They're funded by taxes. Solid waste is one of those enterprise funds, as is stormwater.
I gotcha.
And you pay your utility bill. Police at $15 million is 8% of our total expense, and that's to just exactly what it says. It's our patrol service
Right.
and our investigators and our dispatch. Parks and Recreation is what it takes to keep the parks mowed, looking nice, keep them green, a nice environment to relax in, and to run all of our recreation services. And then fire's the other big one, and it takes us about $7 million to run our five fire stations and make sure that we have the response necessary in order to provide that safety net that we need out there.
Okay, well, good. So there's a look at the expense side. All right, now, we talked about in the beginning how this budget is slimmer significantly than last year's and is closer to the 2007 level than the 2009 level. This is a look from the general fund, and again, those are the police, fire, library, parks and rec, et cetera, that we just talked about. This is where some of those savings or changes and cuts have come. Do you want to pick out a few here to mention? As
a general statement, a lot of the cuts revolved around the decline of development in the community. And since we are building less residential units and there's fewer commercial square footage being built, the development side of our business doesn't have as much work. We don't have as many permits to review. We don't have as many new buildings to inspect. All that work that we do to help the development community. So a big share of these reductions work around that reduction in workload due to the reduced development activity. Highlighted in there is the building inspection and development review services with the 5 FTEs. That's building inspectors and plan review and planning folks that were directly involved with new construction that is not occurring, and so we don't have that workload.
And FTE stands for full-time equivalent, which is basically jobs.
Basically jobs.
A full-time job or two half-time jobs would equal one FTE.
It's a method of calculating the number of full-time jobs, even if not all of your workforce works 40 hours.
Right.
So it's how many 40-hour equivalent jobs do you have?
Okay.
In most cases on this list, these are full-time positions that are going away. They were 40-hour people.
Okay.
Although there are some difference. Our other major one is in the Parks and Recreation program, where we're reducing our park maintenance. And that'll mean that the grass won't get mowed quite as often, that it may not get as much water, the appearance may not be quite as well. We'll reduce the amount of fertilizer we used. In general, the appearance may not be what it has been in the past, but it will still meet the high standards that we've tried to keep here in Loveland.
Okay.
We've got some minor reductions in the police department. One of the more noticeable ones is we're eliminating the mounted patrol unit. And so at special events,
those are the
horses. And so at the big special events where you're used to seeing a policeman on a horse, we won't have that anymore. They'll have to do it either on foot or from their patrol cars.
Okay, and let me amplify that a little bit, because I've learned that the horses themselves, they're not owned by the city, but the cost of upkeep, the feed and boarding and training of those horses,
and the veterinary care,
we're paid by the city. So that won't occur anymore. Let's talk about the top two lines, because quite frankly, those affect the two of us pretty directly.
They do. The major piece that we put in place was that we froze salaries at their current levels. When we developed the 2009 budget, in our finance plan, we had assumed that going into 10, we would have raises on average of about 3.5%, which is similar to what has happened in past years. Mm-hmm. By not budgeting for that pay increase, that saved the general fund $1.2 million. And so that was the first cut, was in freezing it. The other is that we will have all employees take 4 unpaid days during the year. We are excluding, though, the sworn officers in both police and fire and in the dispatch center. And the reason they are not included in this is because the laws governing overtime, we would end up paying more overtime for when officers were being furloughed than what it would save us to have them take the day off.
Right. Plus the bad guys and fire doesn't take itself doesn't take a day off.
Exactly.
So we need full staff all the time.
But all other city staff will be taking 4 furlough days during the year. The implementation of that is still being finalized on how we will work that out, and the policies will come out. But it is 4 unpaid days for all employees.
Okay.
The other 2 other major ones that to point out is that we're reducing the amount of housekeeping you see there for city facilities. That's about half of the budget that we usually have for housekeeping. So we will be reducing the way we clean our buildings and hope that they'll still stay looking nice. And I'm sure Ken will keep them still looking nice. It's just will be a challenge there. We also have, in our capital program, have a program where we budget $500,000 every year for major maintenance to the facilities. And that can include things like replacing roofs, replacing the carpet, major heating and cooling systems, that type of thing. We're reducing that budget by $125,000 going into this year as one of the one-time. And this is a good time to point out that the shaded areas on this graph, they indicate that these are one-time kind of solutions, and so they're not ongoing. And our challenge in future years will be to pick these costs back up in these shaded areas. The other 2 other major ones is we have a annual program that we call street rehabilitation, and that's overlaying the roads, doing new concrete. That budget's been about $3.6 million annually. For this year and maybe even next year, we're reducing that budget by $600,000. That doesn't mean that we won't be repairing streets or keeping up with them. We still have a budget of about $300 million. About $3 million, yes, I wish. About $3 million. Yeah. But it is a significant reduction for this year in that program. And we need to replace our fire trucks. They can only last so long. Yeah. But this is one place where the fire department is going to make a truck they'd planned on replacing go another year or 2.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so these are some of the general fund budget changes or reductions. The next slide, however, and this totals pushing $7 million. So the other side, the next slide is a little bit in the other direction. These are some, especially up here at the top here, about another $1 million that we need additional spending that's needed. And the 2 that stand out to my mind, the top 2, which are for police officers, either unlike you and I, their increases are not frozen, and looks like working with the schools, there'll be 2 resource officers, and that's for their salaries.
Right. The police department uses a different type of pay plan than the rest of the city, and it's more of what we call a step and grade. And for that reason, we needed to leave the salary increases in to stay competitive with our other cities so that we weren't losing police officers to other cities. We're getting ready to sign an agreement with the school board that will, for the first time in many, many years, put some school resource officers in the school. It was in the middle schools. We haven't had resource officers in the middle schools.
They've just been what, in the high schools?
Been primarily in the high schools. And many years ago, they worked the high schools and the middle schools, but the school system has grown to where we weren't able to just to man that many. The $69,000 is the city's share of that.
I see. The city.
The school district is going to help fund this program. In essence, they will pay for the salary for the officers while school's in session, and the city will pay their salary when the school's not in session, is a rough way of how this deal will work.
I got you.
And so we think this is a good improvement. It is an addition of 2 FTEs. So we're adding 2 people here rather than cutting positions.
But the school is picking up.
But the school will pick up a big share of that cost.
Okay. Let's look at the bottom 2 lines of those additions there. Those are good-sized numbers.
Last year, we signed a new contract with the state where our traffic engineering division, which takes care of all of our traffic signals, added some responsibility to take care of more signals on the state highways. And for that, the state is giving us more money.
So the state highways, because even though they're in Loveland proper, they belong to the state. You're talking about like the main drag, Eisenhower, 34 and 402 and North and South Lincoln, yeah.
Lincoln, Cleveland. Those are because those are state highways. It is the state's to maintain, but we have entered contracts with them where we maintain it and they give us money.
They reimburse us.
And so we just expanded that contract, and need to add those expenses for those extra miles of traffic signals.
Sure.
But that's the money coming in. The other increase is in our equipment replacement. We talked earlier about reviewing it, but we have an equipment replacement cycle, and there is planned increase for equipment replacement, and to keep us from having equipment going down and causing problems, even more problems out in the future, we needed to increase the budget for this equipment replacement so that we could take care of what we've got.
Gotcha. Okay, let's look at the last slide in this portion here where we're talking about other significant budget changes. And again, these are reductions, and now we're back pretty much to the enterprise funds that you talked about.
We are. And the enterprise funds were charged with stabilizing their fees and making sure that anything that was done, anything that would affect employees was going to be done equally throughout the city. So if we made a decision that affected employees in the general fund, it was by policy going to affect all of the employees. So the furlough days will apply to the enterprise funds as well as to the general fund.
Okay.
Within the water, wastewater, and power funds, they also did some significant operating reductions. Again, some of it is development related, and there's less work because development is not occurring. They reduced their FTE count by 11, and with nearly over $800,000. And most of those 11 FTEs came out of the power fund. In vehicle maintenance, we're reducing 2 FTEs and about $365,000. We, for many, many years, have maintained the school district's school buses.
Right.
They have just finished a new transportation facility, essentially their own shop, and are taking back over the maintenance of their fleet.
I see.
So the school buses will be leaving the service center. That reduces the workload out at vehicle maintenance, and so
that makes sense.
We are reducing to match up with that loss of work.
Okay. Now all that comes to another 13 jobs and $1.7 million. So that brings it to a pretty substantial grand total there.
Yeah, we're reducing 36 FTEs for about 7.8, but net, remember we added in those 2 school resource officers, so in a total form, it's 34 FTEs that our total FTE count will come down.
Okay. And some of those positions are already open or have been opened, and
about half of them were vacant at the time that the decision was made.
Right, and because some of this, well, obviously you were ahead of this, and some positions that came open you knew couldn't afford to refill anyway. So
yeah, we saw the revenue starting to decline early in this year, and so because of that reduction, took some action. The city manager took action early in the 2009 budget to freeze vacant positions and put some holds on some equipment and several different actions so that we could try and maintain the 2009 budget well in preparation of what we were having to do in 2010.
I got you. Okay, Sal, moving back a little bit, the wheels of government, and I guess private industry too, when it comes to major projects, can turn slowly. We've had a lot of major projects planned and perhaps the blueprints drawn and all of that for a number of years, and now all of a sudden you had to look at it as to whether to put the brakes on entirely or continue through. I know that there are some that are continuing, and these are called capital projects?
Yeah. Building of our major infrastructure we call capital, and that entails development of new parks, to building new buildings, to laying of streets, and as we discussed earlier, that's paid through those impact fees primarily that we come from. We do a 10-year capital program every year with council where they prioritize their different projects.
10 years, yeah.
And we had to adjust this year slightly. Because development is slowing down, we're not receiving impact fee revenue the way we have in past years, and so there's not as much funding available as we had planned on having, which has required us to move some projects out in time from when the plan was done for 2009.
Okay, but these are still going forward.
These are still going forward. Excuse me. And this is what the projects that we have included to be funded in the 2010 program.
And some of this money is some of that expansion money, et cetera, that's already in the bank, so to speak. Yeah,
for our capital program, the city uses what we call a pay-as-you-go philosophy. That means we save the money up before the project is begun, rather than borrowing the money up front and starting the project and then paying off the borrowed money. And building it before the money's there, we save the money up in the bank, and that's why when we looked at that start, we had that large number in the bank, the 151 million. Most of that is saving up for the different capital projects that we have planned coming in future years.
So you do it the opposite way that the city does, that most of its residents do, where we go out and spend the money on a car or a house or whatever it may be, on a mortgage or a credit card, and then pay it off later. You save it up, and only when you have it in your back pocket in the bank, move forward with it.
Correct.
Okay. Well, you had just mentioned the money we do have in the bank. Let's take a look at that. These are the city reserves, and it is a whopping bank savings account. However, it's not like you can just write a check and use this as you wish.
No. Most of the money in there is restricted. Impact fees in particular, by state law and by our city ordinances, are restricted in how we can use them, in that they can only be used to build things. We cannot use them for instance, the fire impact fee, we could use it to build a fire station and even to buy a new fire truck to put in the station, but we can't use that money to buy the firefighters that go on the engine.
So you can't use that to pay their salary. You can, but you can.
We can get them the equipment and the building.
For the bricks and mortar for the building and the trucks.
And so the big share of that 140 million that we think we're projecting, we'll have it in the bank at the end of 2010.
Right. Okay.
Over 100 million of that will be restricted for those kind of capital projects in our different impact fee funds, and a good chunk of that is in our water enterprise as we're saving up for our next new reservoir and to purchase additional water to supply the city.
Okay.
Insurance claims is another large one. We're what we call self-funded. We buy some insurance for major kind of claims. For the most part, we're our own insurance agent, and we have to fund it. So those are reserves that help us in case of major medical claims that we weren't expecting, or if there's workers' compensation or what we call general liability.
Sure.
Something goes wrong with hits one of our buildings, and we have to repair a building.
Okay.
Equipment replacement. Using that pay-as-you-go philosophy, we save money to replace our vehicles. And we'll put a little bit in the bank every year once we bring a vehicle online, so that when its lifespan, and we plan on at least 10 years out of a vehicle. So at the end of the 10 years, we'll have saved up enough to buy the one to replace it.
I got you.
That is most of that 8.3 million in equipment replacement.
And the rest, when you add it all up, all that's left that might be available if we need it, that safety net, I suppose, is about 7 million out of that 140. So that's what, like 5% using my rough math here.
Roughly. And in viewing keeping that 5-year planning cycle that we talked about earlier in mind, what our financial plan is telling us is that we've still got some hard times coming down the road in not too many years. And if, under our current revenue estimates, or if they come true, then we will probably have to do even more reductions in 2013 and 2014 than what we have done here. And so keeping the $7 million is part of the strategy to keep that from being even worse.
Okay. All right. Well, there's not going to be a quiz on all of this, is there? For me or for the folks watching. This gets pretty complicated. Speaking of which, hold that thing up so people can see it. This is actually last year's, but this year's budget book will be about the same. It's 300 pages long, and folks, if you haven't found everything you want to know about the upcoming budget, you can by going online. The 2010 budget book is online. It's not off the printing presses yet, but it is online, so you can go to the city's homepage and look on the homepage for the link to the budget, and when you go there, you can have your choice of printing out all 300 pages or happily just going to the section that's of interest to you. So if you're particularly interested in what's going on at the library or for the police department, et cetera, you can look closer to those areas.
Use the bookmark function that comes with this when this loads into an Adobe type a file.
Right.
And if you use the bookmark function, it makes it very easy for you to go to a specific chapter that you're looking at to look at a specific department or even division and the changes that are occurring within their budget.
Good. Okay. Well, I'm a bit worn out from this. This always goes over my head to a good degree. John, is there anything else you want to mention before we call it a day?
The only other thing is we'll be in front of council on October 20th for the second reading of the budget.
That's the last reading.
That's the last reading.
Unless it gets delayed or something. Yeah.
For something where they will adopt the budget for 2010 for sure.
Okay. So if you want to see the budget being adopted live and in person, tune in here again to Channel 16. Because all the council meetings are on Channel 16, both live and after the fact. There are some delayed broadcasts. John, thank you again. This is our, as they say, our annual visit. Sometimes we see each other here and also on day-to-day things between, but thank you again for doing this. And folks, thank you for tuning in to Loveland's Talking. I hope this was enlightening, and we will see you again next month. Thanks again. Bye-bye.